Welcome back to Proxamer, everybody, and today we're going to be looking at what building a Craftworld Eldar army is going to look like in 10th edition. So, as some of you might have noticed, I put out a community post on my channel a day or two ago covering basically what GW has released on army composition and how armies are going to be built in the new edition. And I have to say, looking it over and hearing and reading GW's article has gotten me a little bit concerned about a few of the things that have been mentioned so far. And I definitely don't want to be an alarmist and say that, some of the things are going to be broken or there's going to be major issues with the game or anything like that at all. I do want to, however, point out that there are a few places where I think there is room for a little bit of abuse, and that just coming from somebody like myself and like many of you who have been playing this game for, sometimes over a decade and have known, past editions and things like that and the many issues that have come along the way. So again, I don't want to make this a negative video at all. I do just want to point it out and kind of just also talk to you guys about what building an Eldar army might look like in the new edition. So without further ado, let us jump right into it. But first, let's go ahead and do a quick overview of what we're going to be looking at in today's video. We're going to be doing a rundown of what has been revealed about army composition in 10th edition so far. We're going to be looking at which Eldar units are going to be safe bets and which ones might be a trap to buy before the new edition comes out. And lastly, I'm going to give you my thoughts and concerns about the new edition regarding army composition. So what has actually been revealed so far? So GW put out an article a couple days ago covering how to build an army in 10th edition. So basically you select detachment rules, which are going to replace sub-factions. And I suspect different detachments will have different requirements and or limitations that will really change the type of army you're going to play. So from there, you choose one character in your army, and that's upgraded to your warlord. You can only have one warlord per detachment. And no more than 3 units of any one datasheet can be included. So that means that you can't have more than 3 units of swooping hawks, for example. Basically the same thing as now. You have the rule of 3 to limit spamming. However, battle line units and dedicated transports are limited to 6 per datasheet rather than the normal 3. So battle line units are probably going to be your troops choices and stuff like that. It may be a little bit expanded. We don't know exactly what types of units battle line units are going to be yet, but probably troops, to be honest with you. And maybe a couple of other units, let's say Dire Avengers and things like that. In addition, what I suspect is that different detachments will also change the unit's role. So some units will have battle line in certain detachments, and in other detachments, they might not have that battle line keyword. It just depends on the detachment. Now, of course, this isn't confirmed yet, but this is something that I suspect heavily going into the new edition. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about which Eldar units are a safe bet and which ones might be a trap. So as for the safe bets to buy before the new edition comes out, I think single units of anything you don't own are a pretty safe bet. It has been hinted that each unit is going to get a special once per game ability that cannot be used multiple times, regardless of how many units you have in your army. And I don't know exactly how this is going to work. Those abilities might be really powerful and really worth it, or they might be really bad. So we're just going to have to see how that goes, right? I'm thinking something along the lines of the mini feats and things like that from War Machine and Hordes, if anyone's ever played that. Basically, units would get a mini feat that they could use once per game, and it was usually a very powerful ability, but you couldn't use it multiple times. So for example, in War Machine and Hordes, if you had 2 units with basically the same stuff, you could only use the mini feat once, regardless of how many units you had. I think that's going to be the same thing here. Battle line units like Rangers, Dire Avengers, Guardians, things like that, I also think are a safe bet to buy at least 1 box of if you don't have them already. So Rangers come to mind as a unit that I think is going to be very useful in the new edition. I really don't see them, being bad or anything like that. Guardians are probably a safe bet, but I don't want to go ahead and go out there and say that fully with full confidence because, as most of you guys know, Guardians have been bad for a couple of editions now in general, and although they are better now, they're still not that great. So, again, I think there's room for them to become better, which is why I think they might be a safe bet. But at the same time, don't go out buying 3 or 4 boxes of them expecting them to be fantastic. Dire Avengers are also a good pick. I think, they're probably in some lists going to be battle line units, so I think Dire Avengers are a very safe pick, and they've always been pretty solid as far as a unit goes. They've never really been in a really bad place. Even when the Eldar had their 8th edition codex in 9th, I was still finding myself using Dire Avengers to fill out my troops choices as well as Rangers. Howling Banshees are also a great pick, I think. If you don't have a unit already, definitely pick some up. They're a plastic kit, so GW has already basically confirmed that they're going to be in the game. They're not going to be rotated out of commission or anything like that. And also, they are featured in the new boarding patrol, and again, will probably still have pretty solid rules because GW does want their boarding patrol game to be a success, right? So I'm thinking Howling Banshees are also going to be successful. Now, something I didn't list here was Corsairs. I think Corsairs are something that I would be a little bit careful about. The reason why is because we don't know how exactly they're going to be able to fit in some of the detachments. And even though there's no more requirements, what I do fear about Corsairs is that they will be unable to benefit from any detachment bonuses or psychic powers just like they do now. So I hope that's not the case. I really hope that they can be included in a more inclusive way into a Craftworld Eldar army, but we're just going to have to wait and see. Of course, if you already have Corsairs from the boarding actions set or anything like that, I'm sure they'll be fine, but I just wouldn't go out buying a bunch of them. Let's just put it that way. It's a trap. Just kidding. I couldn't resist. I'm a bit of a Star Wars nerd when it comes to that meme. So anyway, trap units. I think Phoenix Lords are one of the biggest trap units at the moment because a lot of them don't have current models and they've been rotated out of commission, basically out of production. GW is not currently selling them on their website. And I don't know if this has been clarified yet, but it doesn't look like you can take more than one unique character per detachment. And these are unique characters. So I don't know exactly what they mean by that. I don't know if they mean that you can't take more than one of the same type of unique character. So you can't obviously take 2 Baroths or 2 Fuegans, right? But I also am not clear on whether or not they mean you can only take 1 unique character per detachment or whether they're just referring to the fact that you can't take more than one of the same character. Again, I'll probably need clarification on that, but I think it's a pretty safe bet that you won't be able to. And that kind of makes sense, to be honest with you, because a lot of people were just kind of spamming special characters in some armies and stuff like that. And I know for Eldar, one of the things we liked to do is run multiple Phoenix Lords. And even though I love Phoenix Lords, I think it's very unrealistic that more than one of them would be present in a skirmish, right? So I think that would make a lot of sense from a lore perspective, and I think would be more, immersive as far as a game went. But it is one of those things that, a lot of us that own multiple Phoenix Lords will be kind of bummed out about, especially since we can't field multiple of them. I hope that's not the case, but if it is, I'm not going to cry about it. Now, what I will say, though, is that if you're looking to buy more Phoenix Lords, maybe hold off a little bit on the ones that are currently not in plastic. So, Fuegan, Baharoth, Kahandras, and, of course, who am I forgetting here? Azurman. Right, of course, how could I forget? I would hold off on buying those on eBay or anything like that because, to be honest with you guys, I think they might not even appear in the codex. Or index, I should say. Of course, I don't want to freak anyone out. That's not a fact. That's not been something GW has said they're going to do. But since they're not selling it on their website anymore, those particular models, I would beware of buying one on eBay for, I think some of them are going for literally $40 to $50 on eBay right now. So I would just wait a little bit, and possibly in the future, we're going to just have to see, A, how good they are in the game, and B, if they actually are going to be in the index. I would also bet good money that Prince Riel, being an old sculpt and, again, currently not being sold, I think, on the GW website, if I'm not mistaken, is probably not going to be in the index. Again, I don't know this for sure, but I would bet good money that he's not going to be. If any special character is going to not be in it, it's going to be him. So if you are planning on buying Prince Riel still on eBay or something like that, that's totally cool. He's a really cool Autarch model, I think, but I just would hold off on it. Swooping Hawks as well, I would hold off on, and the reason why is because they've been heavily nerfed, and that's because of the Skyleap ability. So I think the Skyleap ability is going to change. I would bet good money that it's going to become one of those unit mini feats that they can only use once per game. And that's going to severely limit their ability on the battlefield, and they're probably going to be kind of expensive. That's my guess. I think they're going to nerf Swooping Hawks, guys. I don't think Swooping Hawks are going to make it out of this in a better position. So if you do plan to buy some, try to be careful and maybe just limit yourself to one unit so that you can hedge your bets. Harlequins are another unit that I would be very careful about buying right now because we don't know exactly how they're going to fit into the new detachments. And it could very well be that every detachment that you can select can include a couple of units of Harlequins within it, but we just don't know yet. So I would hedge your bets on that too. Don't buy new Harlequin units until we know for sure. And lastly, flyers. So flyers have been something that GW has always had trouble balancing, and to be honest with you, have been a major issue for several editions. So I would hold off on flyers for now until we know how the rules are and how effective they might be on the battlefield. Okay, so that brings us to my thoughts and concerns about the new edition regarding army composition. So something that I was thinking about when I was looking at the new army composition rules was that basically it looks like there is a lot of room to spam certain units. So even though it is a very intriguing idea to have different detachments with different restrictions and army composition, limiting transports to 6 per datasheet instead of the normal 3 as it stands now, I think can be very problematic for the game. And it has been problematic in past editions, especially with armies that have multiple dedicated transports. And let me just talk to you about why for a second. Some of you guys might remember the days of old in 5th edition in about 2010. Some of you guys might actually remember that time, right? Now, back in 5th edition, basically, unless you were running an army that was spamming vehicles, you were not winning a single game. And the reason why, for the most part, is because vehicles were exceptionally hard to kill. And at the time, transports were exceptionally cheap. You could get a Rhino for about 35 points, and basically that Rhino would be just a block sitting on the battlefield used to screen you out, prevent you from getting on objectives, and so forth. And in some armies, they were even free for every single unit you took. And basically what that did is it created a situation in the game where you were flooding the field with just free stuff. And okay, yes, true. It's probably not going to be that bad, but the fact that you can now take up to 6 transports, which have an increased amount of toughness, as GW has kind of insinuated vehicles will have in this new edition, I could very well see a couple of problematic armies, including, by the way, Eldar. And the reason why I say Eldar, especially Craftworld Eldar, is because the Waveserpent has notoriously been one of the best transports in the game for a very long time. And as of now, the Waveserpent is fairly expensive. And it's limited to 3 per army. So, to be honest with you guys, with the current transport rules, Waveserpents are not something that we would normally spam, right? We probably have 1, maybe 2 in our list max. And that's typical. But in this new edition, when you can possibly have up to 6 of them, With improved survivability, this starts to look like something that could be problematic in the edition. Not just for Eldar, but for other armies as well that can use dedicated transports. I'm thinking Necrons, right? Necrons have the Ghost Ark, and the Ghost Ark is actually a very good transport, by the way. I know a lot of players don't take it because it is big and it's hard to hide, and well, to be honest with you guys, Necron players just like spamming warriors right now, but in the new edition, Ghost Arks could be very effective and extremely tough. So there may be some armies out there in the new edition that can spam vehicles very well, and those armies will perform much better. Now, again, this isn't fact because we don't know what kind of rules dedicated transports will have, and we don't know what kind of other things will exist in the game. But again, I think it's a safe bet that limiting transports to 6 per army is probably not a good idea if you're trying to get away from spamming things. And by the way, I can already imagine Dark Eldar armies fielding 6 Raiders and 6 Venoms in their list. Okay? Harken back to the days of 5th edition with Dark Eldar, right? I can very well see that. And I just don't think that's very healthy for the game. I think there was a reason that GW limited this. And going forward, I hope there's some sort of limitation to the amount of transports you can take. Maybe, yes, you're limited to 6 transports of each type, but maybe there's another rule which states, you can only have up to 6 transports in your list total. So yes, they can be of the same type. You can have 6 rhinos in your army, but you can't also have 6 razorbacks in your army, or, vice versa, because that's more dedicated transports than you're allowed to have. But time will tell on that one. I also like, again, the fact that unique characters are being limited to 1 per army. And I did talk about this earlier, but I do think this is more thematic. I do think it basically makes each unique character stand out even more. And I hope this is a fact in the new edition. I also am pretty sad to see factions go away. So it's pretty much confirmed now by GW that our traditional sub-factions like Uthway and the Samhain and Iyanden will be going away in favor of these new detachments, which are kind of like catch-all detachments. And I, again, suspect that some of these detachments will be either Wraith-based or Jetbite-based, etc. But it is sad to see those things go because it was so awesome to have, your Craftworld be represented with its own set of special rules and abilities. So this is going away, and I think there's pros and cons to this. I do think this is overall healthy for the game. The reason why is because some factions, sub-factions that is, got all the love, got all the benefits and bonuses, and were very strong, while other sub-factions were rarely used, and that just really felt bad for a lot of players out there who really liked the lesser sub-factions in the game. Something that comes to mind is the Samhain, right? The Samhain were obviously one of the weakest named Craftworlds in the Eldar Codex, but they were so cool. So we had a lot of Samhain players, bless you guys for sticking through it, who were, outmatched in a lot of their games because their faction rules just weren't that good, right? So I think that eliminating this altogether and GW basically just saying, guys, we're not that great at balancing rules. We give up on balancing sub-factions. Instead, we're going to give you these detachments, which will have bonuses for the units that you want to select, right? So if you're a Samhain player and you want a lot of jet bikes in your army, here's a general detachment, which has a lot of benefits for jet bike units. I think that's a very good way to do it, to be honest with you. And that way your army can feel stronger without having to go for one sub-faction over the other. So I actually think that was a very good thing on GW's part, and again, increases the immersion in the game. I actually do think that's a positive change. I am a little bit sad to see it go. I really liked sub-factions in a weird way, but I also think that it was necessary for the game to become better. So speaking of, here are my detachment predictions for the Craftworld Eldar. So I think that basically every single faction in the game is going to get a set of detachments, and more or less, these are going to be very similar to each other. But they're going to be based on things that are relevant to that faction. So for Eldar, for example, I think that we can expect a Wild Host detachment, which is jet bike themed. I think we can also expect a Spirit Host detachment, which is Wraith themed. A Warlock Conclave detachment, which is Psyker themed. an aspect assault detachment, which is aspect warrior themed, and a silent infiltration detachment, which is ranger themed. And I basically think that all of these different detachments will have bonuses for the certain units involved. So for example, a wild host detachment might have a speed bonus for all jet bike units and all Vipers and things like that. Maybe all skimmers and jet bikes will get some sort of bonus. In a Spirit Host detachment, all Wraith units might get a bonus for being in that detachment. And so on and so forth with the others. I also think that this might change army composition. For example, the normal limit to each unit is 3 of each datasheet. However, in some armies, you might see this limit increased by 1 or 2. And it's funny because I actually had a subscriber on my channel mention this, and at the time I thought, maybe he's onto something here. Nick the Noodle, of course, is who I'm talking about, who basically suggested this before this was even leaked. So kudos to you for kind of having some Eldar foresight on that one. But yeah, I could very well see this happening, and I could very well see the limitations and restrictions being changed based on which detachment is picked, which is very cool. And I'm definitely looking forward to, Samhain armies and Iandid armies being strong again, choosing or being able to choose a wild host or spirit host detachment. So in conclusion, I think 10th edition army building looks very interesting and much more flexible than before. However, I also have a concern that spamming is going to be much worse, regardless of what units have a unique ability or not that can only be used once a game. The reason why is because units that are going to be strong are going to be spammed, right? And in certain detachments, they may be able to be spammed a little bit more. And especially with the case of dedicated transports being able to take up to 6 of them per datasheet, I really think that could be problematic and could lead to a lot of spam in the game. Now, I hope this doesn't happen. I hope there's some sort of prevention for this. But unfortunately, I think there's just going to be some factions that are going to be able to do that very well. And also, because of the increased toughness of vehicles, which GW has basically already stated that is going to happen in 10th edition, you're going to see some problematic lists arising out of that. So again, I hope this isn't the case, but we'll just have to wait and see. That's just one of the concerns that I have based on the information that they've given us so far. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's short video. Thank you so much for watching. For those of you who want to support the channel further, I'm going to go ahead and leave my Patreon and PayPal links in the description. Thank you so much to all of those who have supported so far. Your help is really appreciated. I'm going to continue to update you guys on any reveals or announcements that have to do with 10th edition as we get closer to the summer. And I also will keep you informed about what specifically is going to affect the Craftworld Eldar. All right, everybody, that's going to be it. Once again, peace out and see you guys later. Have a good one, everybody.